Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Logos Project. This is your host, Dom, and in today's video, I'm joined by Father Blake Britton. Now, people might accuse me of stealing all of Larry Chapp's guests, but just to make it clear, I had planned this before Father showed up on Gaudium et Spes 22 on Larry's channel. But it is true, I oftentimes steal Larry's guests because he just has great guests. So, Father, first of all, welcome to the Logos Project. It's very good to have you. How are you doing?
Thank you. Doing awesome. It's a great opportunity to be here with you. And I very much enjoyed Larry. It's so funny that coming right off the heels of that interview, we have this one.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love his blog and his videos, and I'm a faithful viewer. So yeah, I've had him on a few times. He had me on once, and I just love his style, kind of shooting from the hip, and he's got a
Right.
lot of experience as a theology teacher. Yeah, Larry's great. Okay, so let me go ahead and introduce Father Blake for anyone who's new to Father. A lot of you know you through We're on Fire videos and things like that. But for those of you who are new, Father Blake Britton is a Roman Catholic priest, the Diocese of Orlando, Florida, holding degrees in philosophy and theology. His writings are featured in various publications, including Word on Fire, Ignatius Press, Humanum Humanum Cultural Review, that's a journal, and Ave Maria Press. Father Blake is author of the award-winning book Reclaiming Vatican II, published by Ave Maria Press, and Word on Fire. After 5 years of parish ministry in the Diocese of Orlando, during which time he also served as Assistant Vocations Director of the Western Deanery, Father Blake was sent to the Pontifical John Paul II Institute, earning his licentiate in sacred theology with honors from the Lateran University in Rome. He is currently completing his doctoral studies, specializing in the post-conciliar interpretation and implementation of the Second Vatican Council. So first of all, welcome, Father. Um,
Thank you.
and second of all, I do want to apologize to any viewers if the internet is a bit on and off. I'm working on it, Wi-Fi trouble. So I just want to, if something happens, just want to apologize. That being said, Father, off air, we were talking about the fact that you often get interviewed about Vatican II because
Mhm.
you wrote a book on it, which is a great book, by the way. Audience, please grab it. We don't have we're obviously going to talk somewhat about the council, but we don't have to go deep into the weeds about the paracouncil and traditionalism, things
Mhm.
like that. I really want to talk about evangelization, beauty,
Mm.
encountering the culture, converting the culture to
Yeah.
Christ and recentering everything on Christ and how we can do that. What's the best way to do that? So maybe just to kick things off, speaking of Vatican II, do you see the council more
Mm.
as a starting point, right, than the
Mhm.
conclusion
Mm.
for evangelization?
Yeah. More than anything, it's a continuation of
Hmm.
the missionary spirit of the church. In many ways, the Second Vatican Council continued what had been done since the Council of Jerusalem, which is reevaluating the culture, sort of gazing upon what was needed by the people of that culture, and then the best ways to continue transmitting and promoting the gospel in that culture. So it's not so much a starting point, or even if it's an end point, right? It's this a
Yeah.
continuation of the church's missionary spirit and a deep desire to inspiration from God through
Mm,
His bride, the church, to invite us. How are we to continue this great work of saving souls in the third millennium?
yeah. That's fantastic. I like that, right? Continuation. The church is always in the business of evangelization, and I have noticed a lot of the encyclicals of the popes in the last several decades have focused oftentimes on evangelization because there's this realization that in the third millennium we've kind of hit a turning point where we're no longer
Right,
in
right.
a Christian world falling apart, but in a post-Christian world, a kind of
Mhm.
new pagan world that needs to be re-evangelized.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, very much so. Very much. I mean, that's a key observation that even the conciliar fathers, unwittingly in some ways, because they had not yet seen the real fallout of secularism as the way that
yeah.
millennials and Gen Z and now Gen Alpha have and are going to see in the upcoming decades. But very much so, this is a key point. It's not just about trying to save Christendom. Unfortunately, that's
Mhm.
already been lost, meaning
Yeah.
this kind of general consciousness of a Christian culture being taken for
Yeah.
granted among marriage, among family, among the school systems, etc. So really what we're doing here is we're going back to the foundations of what is necessary to rebuild a Christian civilization. And so we're
Yeah.
so much the generation of Aquinas as we are the generation of Augustine. Uh,
Mm,
I think it's always helpful to correlate our lives to the history of the saints. And so,
yeah.
whereas you have the high medieval period, which in my opinion is the most beautiful period in all of church history, I think it was the
Hmm.
pinnacle of the Christian expression of culture. My hope is that one
Yeah.
day we'll have that again. I know that I won't live to see it because that's not really what's been given to me at this time in the life of the church. So I see as much more in lieu with the, or in tandem rather, with the apostolic period than we are at the medieval
Hmm.
Newtonian period. And it was those initial apostolic persons, starting with the apostles themselves, their disciples, their successors, and the leading, of course, to
Yeah.
the patristic age up to the 10th century, that laid the foundations for what would become medieval Catholicism and Christendom, and then later on the Council of Trent, etc. So this is something that I find helpful to have a proper lens, and that will guide then the form in which we're able to have our evangelical process.
I love that. Yeah. I've spent years reading Joseph Ratzinger, and
Mhm.
I wrote my master's thesis on aspect of his theology. And he's been my guide in so many areas.
Yeah, yeah.
And I bring this up because Ratzinger speaks of Augustine
Hmm.
in a way that reminded me, what you said reminded me of this, where he speaks of Augustine as incredibly, almost astonishingly contemporary. When
Yes.
you read Augustine, it's like, oh my goodness, he's talking exactly about how I feel, about my
Mhm.
experiences, about my culture, about this kind of the powers and principalities of the day. It's incredible. And Peter Sewald, the biographer of
Hmm.
Ratzinger, basically described him as Augustine redivivus. I don't know how you say that in Latin, but
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Ratzinger is kind of a new Augustine. But no, so that's so true to me. And I agree with you. The Middle Ages really was kind of a high point in terms of
Hmm.
the arrangements of the temporal power and the spiritual power and things like that.
Right.
Um, but and not to go off too much on a tangent, but I recently read a book by Joseph Pieper on Thomas
Hmm.
Aquinas, where he says actually, like, so first of all, he affirms that that's true. It's a high point in
Hmm.
philosophy and theology, but it was also a very turbulent time with the
Yes.
Mendicant orders rising, and all the controversies and the fighting in the university, and then
Hmm.
there's also an initial assertion of temporal power by the German royalty and things like
Right.
that, and
Right.
Thomas is involved in all this. Anyway, but yeah, no. So I love what you said.
Yeah.
But so speaking of this approach of evangelization and how people like Augustine speak to us, I think of his poetry and how beautiful his theology is. Beauty, it seems to me, is something that, at least in our theological consciousness, has come back to the fore. And
Hmm.
so, would you say that beauty is one of those bridges, maybe even the
Yeah.
strongest bridge for bringing people to Christ today, specifically?
Yeah. No question. First, we have to ask, what is the problem of contemporary culture? So obviously,
Yeah,
this loss of the memory of Christ, but as a result of that, a loss of what it really means to be a creature. To be a
mhm,
human person, which is why John Paul II was so prophetic with his theology of the body. He understood that it was by recentering ourselves on a Christian anthropology, we'd be able to rehabilitate a consciousness of the dignity of the person and therefore also imago Dei
yeah,
and a proper adoration of God within society. So, most certainly, we have this loss of what it really means to be loved by a father, to be
yeah,
a creature within a world that's been given to us, and
yeah,
therefore, we've also lost the sense of the wonder of that world and the ability to behold it. In that
yeah,
regard, the transcendental beauty is especially apt when it comes to
yeah,
inspiring people back to what it means to be a creature, which is the best way
yeah,
I've found to really articulate the problem that we're facing. And von Balthasar
mhm,
himself will make this thematic throughout his work. Of course, he wrote that very famous trilogy in the first
yeah,
volume, The Glory of the Lord. He'll speak with that in his opening prologue and introduction. He'll say it very clearly that beauty
yeah,
is what will speak most appropriately to this culture, and the
Yeah.
tradition and the real wonder of Catholicism, because that's what we've forgotten about. That's what we've really lost a sense of. What does it mean that we have a world that is intelligible to us, and that intelligibility points towards something beyond ourselves and is actually an invitation? It's filled with the Logos. It's filled with a
Hmm.
divine rationality that helps us realize who we are as the image and likeness of
Hmm.
that rationality itself. And thus enter into a dynamic communion, not with this sort of ambiguous universal spirit, but with a person,
Yeah.
with a face, with a name, who then also gives us the freedom to articulate ourselves within that relationship. And this is where the various liturgical and sacramental traditions of the church come into
Yeah.
play. And thus we have really as a centerfold of the church's sense of beauty, the liturgy, always.
Yeah.
This is the
Yeah.
source and
Yeah.
summit of the life of the church, as Vatican II will repeat over and over again in this document, Sacrosanctum Concilium, and also in post-conciliar text. John Paul II, Joseph Ratzinger will speak about this throughout their writings. It begins with this beauty of the liturgy, which is to say, this centrality on the nature of worship, which is an active relationship with the Lord, and ensuring that these practices and these traditions are really lived with the fullness
Yeah.
of dynamism and joy. But then
Yeah.
also just letting people see the profundity of Catholicism. That's what I found most effective thus far in my ministry. It's the
Yeah.
joy of a testament of my own encounter with Christ, and then educating people or letting people witness how much I enjoy being a Catholic. The
Yeah.
things that I'm fascinated with, these different,
Yeah.
again, traditions, and these different practices that we have, and people sort of look at it with a kind of novelty, which is quite
Hmm.
fascinating. You see this,
Yeah.
Chesterton will write about this in his book
Yeah.
on his own personal conversion. He says, the Catholic Church is the only institution that always seems new.
Yeah.
It's treated as if it's a new heresy by the world. So the world is
Yeah.
always treating it like it's the biggest, most dangerous threat ever, even though it's 2,000
Yeah.
years old. And then it's also seen with a kind of novelty by those who really don't understand it. There's this mysterious, this kind of magic, if you will, around
Hmm.
Catholicism, and it
Yeah.
either is repulsive or it's something that's deeply attractive to the human heart. And
Yeah.
really what we should be doing is going full hog into that, not
Yeah.
trying to
Yeah.
commune or relativize it, but letting it really be seen. And I can tell you firsthand, I know you're also a consequence and a fruit of this, right? Is that for millennials and
Yeah.
Gen Z, we're having a massive increase in the traditional practice of religion
Yeah.
because we have a culture that's become void of this transcendental sense of beauty and wonder. And
Yeah.
Catholicism is, of course, presenting that in a really tangible and beautiful way.
Hmm. No, that's fantastic. Yeah, no, someone once said, I don't know who it was, but make Catholicism weird again, right?
Interesting,
Like,
interesting. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
lean into all the weird stuff. Like it's otherworldly. And Pope
yeah.
Leo a few months ago mentioned, that we need to learn from our Eastern brothers to
Mm,
recover a sense of the sacred and of the mysterious in our liturgy.
yes.
And that sounds just fantastic. And that
Yeah.
was, the the intention of the council to reform the liturgy to kind of enter more deeply into it, mystagogically into the liturgy,
Yes.
and have it spill out in your lives, right?
Yeah.
And no, that's fantastic because
Well,
beauty. Oh, go ahead, Father. Go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah. I mean, on that note, you know who's going to be very helpful? Our Eastern brothers and sisters, certainly. I'm adamantly
Yeah,
praying for the reunification between the East and the
yeah,
West as well, between our Orthodox brothers and sisters, but definitely our
yeah,
Eastern rite, so the Maronites, the Coptics. Uh, the other church that's going to be absolutely fundamental to this reacclamation of the mysterious, of the transcendental, will be the African and Asian church, because they
mm,
still have a culture, even within
mm,
its paganism. So there's a reason Cardinal Sarah speaks about this in his biography.
mm-hmm,
There's he's only one generation removed from paganism, which has this kind of
mm,
natural, if you will, spirituality, and thus a kind of deep sense of the mysteriousness and wonder of the world that, of course, needs to
yeah,
be converted fully to the Logos, converted fully to
yeah,
Jesus Christ. And because Cardinal Sarah had such an immediate experience of that growing up as a boy in Africa, and then
yeah,
encounters the truth of the gospel, his
yeah,
sense of what it means to be religious is very different than the West. So in the
mm,
West, especially the continent and the United States of America, and some of the Latin cultures as well, influenced by Spain, by France, Belgium, what we have is this presupposition about what it means to be religious, wherein
Mhm.
it is purely subjective. And
Yeah.
so religion is something that is for me, as opposed to religion being an expression of the world itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Religion as an expression of something beyond me, to which
Yeah.
now I have a responsibility to conform, so cum formare, to dialogue
Yeah.
with the form of, and allow it to inform me and educate
Yeah.
me to what it means to be a person. And the Africans, the Asians still have a sense of this because they have old world religions, the Indian church
Mhm.
too. And I really hope that with that in combination with our Arabic, so with our Eastern, brothers and sisters,
Yeah.
can help the West really sense what does it mean,
Yeah.
the mystery and the beauty of the faith, and do we allow a space where we don't actually have to make everything 2 + 2 = 4, which is
Mhm.
helpful, but it's not the purpose of religion. Can we
Yeah.
allow the space wherein the wonder and the beauty, the majesty of God is really able
Mm.
to speak to us, which will not cripple our ability to
Mhm.
progress, but will actually constitute an authentic progress as opposed to the
Yeah.
artificial one that we're having now. Just because we have an iPhone 17 does not mean we're a progressive culture. It actually, I
Yeah.
think, is one of the signs that we're not a progressive culture. We're
Yeah.
slowly, there's a great scene in the movie Over the Hedge when the raccoon is
Oh,
watching people
yeah.
drive around in their cars,
Yeah.
and he said that's a beast that the humans ride in because they're slowly losing their ability to walk, and it's like
Yeah.
it was such a comedic thing from an animal's perspective. What a vehicle is that we're
Yeah.
losing our ability to do basic functions and to truly be human, and we're replacing it while fooling
Yeah.
ourselves that we're advanced with these technologies. So again, I think the African Asian
Mm.
church as well as the Eastern brothers and sisters can help us in that regard.
Yeah, I love that. There's a quote that I'm gonna butcher and paraphrase so badly that I might be the author, but it's from Newman. He said something like, "Give me a superstitious man over a rationalist."
Mhm. Yeah.
Obviously, Newman
Yeah.
would want neither superstition nor rationalism. I mean, the great
Mhm.
Newman, right? He wants this beautiful synthesis between faith and reason. But there's something to that the West and its secularism has just
Yes.
sapped the sense of mystery out of it and made us so radically impoverished on a cultural level
Yeah.
that like it's making people depressed and
Yeah.
lonely. And that goes back to the technology. I think that going back to the question about beauty,
Yeah.
I think that we're so disconnected from each other, but not only from each other, but from the real world, that
Mhm.
beauty might just be a bridge not back to Christ first, but to reality, and then
Yes.
ultimately
Yes.
to Christ, who is the source of all reality. But like because we're beauty, especially the beauty of nature, as you said, but also just the beauty of a beautiful story in a book or a beautiful
Mhm.
symphony or a beautiful painting, as opposed to screens and AI and
Yep.
Facebook scrolling or what have you. I mean, I think the church needs to lean into the weirdness of being off of so much of this, segregating technology and back into local communities. Um, yeah,
And what
but
we'll
anyway,
show in the end is that we're not weird. We're the ones who are living humanly.
we're
What's
the sane
weird
ones.
is an iPhone
Yeah,
and having your child look at it 7 hours a day. What's not
yeah,
weird is playing with your child in the backyard. Right? And
that's
so this
fantastic.
definition of even weirdness, I'm like, no, actually, the world has this kind of really
Yeah,
inhumanity about it. And I would even say that with the life of the saints, right? Like the saints are not inhumane; they're just too human for the rest of us. That's why they sort of
yeah,
repulse us in some way. For those of us who aren't really seeking Christ, is that saints are people that are so worldly, that they live so deeply in what it means to be a world that's been redeemed,
mhm,
that for those of us who aren't living in the world, but in some kind of
yeah,
filtered, abstract version of it, a saint seems strange. Teresa of
yeah,
Avila seems weird, like Catherine of Siena, Francis of Assisi, but
yeah,
it's because they're the only ones that actually see the world for what it is through the lens of
yeah,
Christ. It's we who have forgotten what it means to be in the world because we've forgotten the
yeah.
purpose of creation, which in the end is to glorify God, is through
Oh
the
man,
Son by the grace of the Spirit. So as we also, this does speak to the evangelical question you had earlier. The real answer, therefore, is not so much combating culture, which is something I've
hmm
found as of late, even among Catholic circles. This almost this
yeah,
kind of anxiety or angst, this impulse to be combative within culture. Of course, there needs
Yeah.
to be a defense of the true. Of course, if people are
Right.
coming to for our children through the transgender movement, we should safeguard them with
Yeah.
families. These are different things that need to be addressed. So there are
Mm.
responsibilities we have as husbands, fathers, mothers, priests, bishops, etc. But
Yep.
that being
Yeah.
said, the real answer is not so much combating the culture as it is educating culture
Yeah.
through the embodiment of what it really means to be cultural. Because the
Yeah.
ultimate
Yeah.
culture is the one of Jesus Christ. That's where the word culture comes from. Cultus, it's a cult. So a
Yeah.
culture is defined by what it worships. There is no true thing to worship except Christ, the way, the truth, and the
Yeah.
life. And so if we live a culture which is Christocentric, and we constitute
Yeah.
that within, first and foremost, our appropriate state of life. So whether you're a
Yeah.
priest, a religious, a lay person, a single person, married person, and then allow that also to profusely, sort of very naturally, organically, if you will, pour out into the world. What happens is people who witness it are drawn. Why? Because it is true. And whether we
Mhm.
believe it or not, whether we're conscious of it or not, we are religious beings. When we
Mhm.
see truth, when we see something beautiful, when we see the good, we cannot help but be drawn to it. And they'll start asking questions. Why don't you let your kids have screen time? Or why are
Yeah.
you strict with your kids on screen time? Why is
Yeah.
it, that you don't do X, Y, or Z? And then you're able to give a response. And the response is not one just of morality. Well, I don't do it because it's
Mhm.
sinful, but it's one that comes from a place of the fullness of life. This is what John chapter 10,
Yeah.
verse 10 is about, that Zoe that Christ is speaking of, this super
Mhm.
abundant life that I found. And you're able to say to culture, not so much you're evil and bad. That might be true. There might be evil and bad
Yeah.
things, but you can now say
Yeah.
to culture, here's another way. Here's
Yeah.
another way that you've made a claim that if I live this way, I'll be fulfilled. We've lived that way and you're not fulfilled. I'm now making a claim. Luigi Giussani will speak about this in the religious sense. I now make a
Mhm.
claim. Jesus Christ is the fullness of life and I am filled. So
Yeah.
here, try this. And you'll find that people are drawn to it. Of course, we already have seen that with the conversion numbers in the past couple of years.
Yeah, isn't that encouraging? Yeah. No, everything you're saying reminds me, of course, of a theologian that we both love a lot, Henry de Lubac,
Oh,
because
yeah. Great.
his answer to, as the title of his book calls it, the drama of atheist humanism,
Mhm.
right, is not to fight back and just kind of attack humanism, but to propose a
Mhm.
real humanism, a deeper, more beautiful, more profound humanism. And as
Mhm.
Ratzinger once put it, it's the humanism of the humanity of God, right?
Yes.
It's
Yes.
Christ. Yeah. No, I love that, and that ties in perfectly. So it's really a strange situation where there is a lot of bad things in this post-Christian culture that
Mhm.
we can't accept, and yet we don't want to merely be on the defensive or offensive.
Right.
And
Right.
so what is the way forward? And it seems to me like this is more what the council was trying to do is, and Chap calls this the analogical approach to the world.
Hmm.
Analogical meaning
Yeah, that's
affirming
brilliant.
and denying, right?
Mhm.
And I bring this up because we just kind of railed a little bit against technology, and rightfully so. And yet here I am with
Mhm.
a YouTube channel, and
Yeah.
you have talked about video games, right? So
Yeah.
maybe let's talk about that. Let's transition
Sure.
about how do you think video games would reveal people's longing, right, for
That's a
mission
great
and
question.
transcendence, especially? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what you're really getting to the heart to, before I can answer that question appropriately, is uh, what does it mean to live in history? Is the foundation of that
Mm,
question. So, John the
yeah.
23rd will use the phrase reading the signs of the times. And that's a
Yeah.
historical and theological claim that he's making within the tradition of the church. Thomas Aquinas will also speak about this. Augustine, in many
Yeah.
ways, especially in his book, The Confessions, when he has a whole diatribe on
Yeah.
the ontology of time, what it means to be in history. So, when we're
Yeah.
in history, we're historical creatures. And remember that history is also a creature, which is something that's
Mm,
amazing. History's created,
yeah.
which means that
Yeah.
it has an end. That end is
Totally.
Christ. That end is the eschaton. So that means that history
That's
is not
great.
just the passage of time where random things happen. History itself is destined, is teleologically bound to an end, and
Yeah.
ergo, all things within history can be brought into correlation with that end. And that end being the passion, death, resurrection, ascension, and seated at the right hand of the Father of Christ, the descent of the Spirit at Pentecost, the bringing of the church to the Parousia. And this is what gives Christians the ability to navigate the world by being in it, but not of it. This is what allows us to do what Augustine speaks about, which is to find gold wherever it is to be found. And that becomes the paradigm of evangelization in many ways. The true evangelist, and it's an art form. It's very difficult to do because it takes a profound, first of all, deep self-knowledge in Christ. It takes a humility before the mystery of the Lord. But then it also takes incredible patience, to be able to sit down and say, okay, so there's this young man, I'm speaking from a pastoral experience as a previous parish priest, who plays Call of Duty 10 hours a day. His mom wants me just to talk to him and say, Call of Duty is bad. Tell him he shouldn't play video games anymore. And he should not get out the basement, right? Now, yes, he shouldn't be in the basement playing 10 hours a day, but there's some room to grow there. The most effective tool for that particular encounter is not just listing the bads of video games and Call of Duty, but to really ask, okay, he's created in God's likeness and image. He's baptized. He's a rational being, and he's a religious being, which means he will only do an action because he perceives it as rational, because he perceives it as a good, or there is an actual good within it that he is seeking, but it's not a fulfilled good. And this has been my approach to video game culture, to anime culture, to just culture in general. Why do I say that? From personal experience. So one of my original questions, I was maybe 11 or 12 years old at the time. We were coming back from a trip, a family vacation. I remember sitting in the back of my mom and dad's Suburban, and I was so sad about leaving vacation. And my thought was, why am I sad? Like, why do good things end? What am I really upset about? And I was upset because there was a good there. There was something profound that I was recognizing, which was time with my family. And vacation represented, this is me years later reflecting on that. Of course, my 12-year-old boy mind couldn't fully understand it, but I did pose the question, I was really mourning because that vacation represented a form of communion, which is really what my heart was aching for. And this is why people like going on vacation with their families. It's not just so much where we're going, it's the communion that's being shared in along the way. And that just started a little endeavor in my own life. Why do I like playing Super Smash Brothers with my siblings? Like, why do I really like it? I mean, yes, I like beating my little brothers in Super Smash Brothers, right? That's a blast. And I'm the oldest of 4 kids, so I was always more learning. But until my youngest brother, he ended up becoming really good with Mario, and now he beats me all the time. So I can't compete anymore. I'm the old man in the group now. But why did I really enjoy it? I enjoyed it because I was with my brothers and my sister. I enjoyed it because of the memories and the experiences they had. So it wasn't just that I liked being on a screen for 5 hours. I liked being with my siblings for 5 hours. And the screen happened to be part of it. So when we have this kind of dialogue, let's say with a young man, we're returning to our story, who's in his mom's basement for 10 hours playing Call of Duty. The first question that we should ask is, why do you do this? Tell me, like, what do you really enjoy about it? Like, have a positive conversation. Assume that he is a good human who's longing for something good. And what I think you'll be surprised at what you hear. So when I was doing this work with Word on Fire in regards to video games, one of the first things I did was started talking to gamers. Some of them very famous, some of them just run of the mill, my godsons, right? My goddaughters, all of them who play video games. Sort of sitting down with them, my own brothers and sister, saying, okay, tell me why you enjoy this thing. Why do you like playing Halo Infinite? And is it cool that I get these achievements? Yes, but it's actually because I get to talk to friends that I had back in high school, and now we're all living in different places and we have our own families and lives and community. If you talk to the young teenage boy, why do you really like playing these different video games? Like Skyrim was very popular for a time. There's some others now, some RPGs, JRPGs. Why do you really like playing this? Well, there's a sense of mission. There's a sense of accomplishment that I'm not able to achieve in the society, because the society has reduced a sense of mission to just mean getting a 401k. And that's not fulfilling for a human soul, but fighting a war with my band of brothers. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
being part of the squad actually gives the illusion of a more fulfilling act. And in some ways it is, because I'm
Yeah.
achieving a sense of fraternity, right? Or this sense of identity. When I get to
Yeah.
create my own character, when I get to be in this world, one of the ones that really gets me is Stardew Valley, where you're literally, the video game is, you're a farmer and you
Oh.
plant. That's the entire video game. And you can be in there for years. And you
Yeah.
just own a farm, you get married, you have a family, you have, and it's almost like a little bit like Sims, but much better in my opinion. But I
Yeah.
was really struck by that. It's
Yeah.
just, wow, this is what people actually want. And you're starting
Yeah.
to see that, especially with Gen Z men who need to become a top priority in the life of the church right now. Instead of, really putting some of our energies in places where I don't think they're better spent, let's go and
Mhm.
spend it on this entire generation of men who become marginalized in the past decade and a half,
Yeah.
because of the reprioritization of society as a whole. And this is a good way to reach into that through the video game culture, so yeah, I mean, I could talk about video games for hours because I think it's just it's a fascinating dynamic that really shows some very positive signs. Some very positive signs. If you
Yeah.
look deeper than just the gaming, and you look at what the games are about, why they're played, who
Mhm.
is playing them, why
Yeah.
they're doing it, it's gonna evoke some really thought provoking evangelical prerogatives.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I mean, that's the thing about the internet and just digital media and technology in general is that,
Mhm,
I mean, I think both you and I would agree there's these massive dangers. I mean, the kind of polarization. Also,
mhm.
some people can kind of get completely cut off from reality by being stuck in video games and not socializing and getting lonely. But there's also the fact that in one way or another, everyone is now online.
Yeah, yeah,
And
absolutely.
so what as Catholics should we do to
Mhm.
kind of bring people back to reality through
Yeah,
what's
yeah.
online? And I like what you're
Mhm,
doing, which is trying to
mhm.
drilling in to find out what makes them tick. Why are they enjoying this? And
Yeah.
you're right, like what comes to the fore is that all of these deep human religious even desires. I
Mhm.
love what you said, that history is teleology bound, telos bound, right? Like there's a
Yeah.
sense in which all our desires and everything in our life is just oriented towards this
Mhm.
ultimate good, and it has a face. It's Jesus Christ. I mean, it's very Delubachian, right?
Yeah.
All of
And
history is headed towards Christ in communion,
yeah, and that
but
gives us a special confidence as evangelists, because there is
yeah,
nowhere I can go in this world that is antichrist. Christ
yeah,
has already conquered the
yeah,
world. See,
yeah,
this is the joy of Christians. This is how Maximilian Kolbe goes into a concentration camp and becomes a saint, because
yeah,
that concentration camp did not belong to the Germans. It belonged to Jesus
yeah,
Christ. It was under his
yeah,
authority. And
yeah,
even that place, so horrific, so evil, so disgusting, could in
mhm,
some way be a field of grace transformed by the blood of Jesus. Because there is
yeah,
nothing in this world that is not under the authority of the cross, not under the
yeah,
authority of the one who died. And that
yeah,
is our strength. So why be afraid? Why despair? Why waste time on those kinds of feelings? And the Desert Fathers, especially monks like Maximus the Confessor and some others, will talk about this ad nauseum. It's just a waste
yeah,
of time to even
yeah,
think or to feel those kind of things, those kind of passions. Rather, we have to have the passion of hope constantly
mhm,
inspiring us, that's rooted in the recognition of the fact, of the truth that Christ has died, Christ is risen, and Christ will come again. And
yeah,
now I know that no matter what happens, it's within the prerogative, it's within the dimensions of the church. And I
yeah,
belong in that place. Wherever I go, I already belong, because
mhm,
Christ is in the world and has redeemed it. And there's nothing that's
yeah,
against me. If Christ is for me, what can be against me? And even that which appears to be against Christ can be somehow mysteriously, by the grace of the Spirit, redeemed and transformed so as to become a foundation for the proclamation of the gospel. And that's what
yeah,
inspired, especially during our great missionary period within the life of the church, the 16th century and the 15th century, when the Spaniards and the French and the Dutch
yeah,
and all these are going out and evangelizing. That's what gave them courage. I mean, that's what inspired the
mhm,
first ever international human rights document from the University of Salamanca under the papacy of Pope Paul
mhm,
III. This notion that when I go to the
yeah,
Native Americans who have never heard the name of Jesus, can they actually be baptized and saved? Yes, because somehow Christ is there. Right?
yeah,
Christ has saved the world. And so there's a kind of authority I can go into these Native American tribes with as a member of the church, because I know that they too were created for this gospel, even if at this moment they may be antithetical to it. This is for
Yeah.
them, and they're made for it, you know. So I approach video game culture, I approach just culture in general, I mean, with the same
Yeah.
mentality.
Yeah.
Even secularism, it's such a farce, you know, because
Yeah.
it's the most religious form of atheism I've ever found, you know. In that regard.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I find that so interesting. I mean, because that's basically, I mean, this is what I love about Bishop Barron and Word on Fire, which is it's very much this analogical approach, and it's really a paradoxical, strange, and centrally Christian idea, which is
Mhm.
this kind of these two poles, which is that it's not a retreat from the world, nor is it a caving into the world.
Right.
It's a real encounter with the world that doesn't just condemn bad things, but also affirm good things. And so the question becomes like, okay, are we affirming the world or are we condemning the world? And,
Right.
and it's really
Right.
kind of like it's Christ's, what he said, like we're not of the world, but we are in the world, and the world kind of has to go through a baptism, a reconfiguration.
Yeah.
And what I find interesting is that when someone is baptized, they do die. Like the old man is put to death. There's a
Mhm.
kind of destruction of sin and of all that's bad, but it's not a different man that rises again. It's the same man, but he is still a new man. So there's a
Mhm.
paradox there, right? And it seems like
Yeah.
conversion, when it comes to culture, there has to be a kind of a conversion, a turning away from what's bad and letting it
Right.
die,
Of
but
course. Of
also
course.
a redemption of that very culture. And it's just a
Mhm.
strange paradoxical position that I think is
Yeah.
the heart of evangelization. Yeah.
And it's one of those things to where Christ never takes anything from you except that which is not real. So
Yeah.
sin is not a foundational reality. What I mean by that is, of course, there is a such thing as sin. What I'm saying is,
Mhm.
and Augustine will speak about this, right? Evil does not exist, meaning on its own
Yeah.
power. It's a
Yeah.
deprivation of the good. And
Yeah.
so when we come to Christ, when we truly experience conversion, when we repent and we're baptized and believe in the gospel, and we fulfill this mandate of the Lord, and we as evangelists preach the gospel of Jesus, we can
Yeah.
also say with confidence, I'm not asking you to leave anything that you really love behind.
Hmm.
Because everything that you may think you love that you're leaving behind is fulfilled infinitely more in the person of Jesus. You're
Mhm.
leaving nothing behind and you're getting absolutely everything. Like
Yeah.
this is the beauty of the gospel of Jesus. It's unbelievable. This is why John Paul II is able to say, for those who live in love, sacrifice is easy. And
Yeah.
so we have sort of this mentality in our mind, I think, that can be unhealthy and also unattractive. And it's born out of a sort of a pseudo Protestant dialectic, in my opinion. And there's also a postmodern component to it as
Mm.
well, a little bit of Jansenism, maybe
Mhm.
some Pelagianism here and there, depending on the individual. So
Mhm.
that's a whole other conversation. But there's this kind of mentality that to follow Christ should be begrudging for a while in some way. Like there
Mhm.
has to be some kind of pain or
Yeah.
suffering. Now,
Yeah.
there are pains and sufferings,
Yeah.
but it's not that the pains and sufferings are you letting go of something that is essential or foundational to you. The
Mhm.
pain and suffering is a consequence that I've conformed my heart, unfortunately, to things that are not natural to me, as
Yeah.
Maximus will say, things that are against my nature, and things that are against supernature, so against the beauty of grace that is seeking to redeem me. And what I'm actually experiencing as pain is really just a pruning so that a rose can bloom, so that
Mhm.
true fruit can grow. And if we're able
Yeah.
to live in the dynamic of love, all of a sudden over time, those things seem less and less dreadful because you're actually realizing,
Yeah.
what am I really giving up? What am I actually
Yeah.
sacrificing? So I'll share one quick story about that. It happened not too long
Mhm.
ago. I was scheduled, or so I thought, to say a 7 a.m. mass, and
Mm.
I show up, and either I or the people who scheduled me, there was some kind of miscommunication. And
Mhm.
so I was not scheduled to say mass. Now, the night before, I had been up for a while because I was on the phone with someone in crisis. So I got very little
Mm.
sleep that night. But I thought, nope, I have
Yeah.
mass. It's okay. Da, da, da. So I arrived there exhausted. Then I'm told, no, we don't need you for mass. And I just
Oh,
start
yeah.
laughing and literally
Yeah.
out loud. And it wasn't a laugh. It wasn't like a maniacal laugh, like the Joker or something.
Yeah.
like I snapped, like
Yeah. Yeah.
it wasn't a maniacal laugh,
Yeah.
like, oh. It was this
Yeah.
kind of absolute freedom
Hmm.
in which I was so grateful, like an unbelievable gratitude came out of my heart at that moment. And I actually hugged the person who told me, and they were like, "You're
Hmm.
not upset, Father?" I said, "No." I said, "Actually, I really needed this. Thank you so much."
Hmm.
And this joy overcame me because I realized I didn't really lose anything, right?
Yeah.
In that moment, like my heart went with an openness to consecrate the Eucharistic species, to serve God's people, to provide them the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus. And then
Hmm.
I may have not slept, right? But did I really lose anything? What did I really lose in comparison to what I received? And
Mm.
so just living from that kind of perspective, all of a sudden your short temperedness and your sort of pettiness and the little things that we complain about, and even some more grand, serious issues, they gain perspective because we see them with the
Yeah.
mind of God and not with the mind of man. We see them in relation to the end, which is the
Yeah.
Perugia, memento mori, as the monastic tradition teaches us. So yeah, this
Yes.
allows for a special kind of freedom. I know that we've gone, around and around many different topics. Going back to our original conversation on the digital media, what do we need to do?
Yeah.
I mean,
No.
the real foundations of that is we're just going to have to first of all look at the trends in culture. So why is
Yeah.
that media is starting to become more and more popular? What are people actually looking for? What does the church have to provide as an alternative, which is superior? And for everything that is incorrect, if you will, or
Hmm.
inadequate in civilization, the church always has a superior response that is adequate. That's
Yeah.
something else we need to be confident in. We don't have to also reinvent the wheel here.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Eucharist will always be better than any, just
Yeah.
fill in the blank. And the Eucharist is better than
Yeah.
that. Right? Baptism will always be better. Fill in the blank. It will always be
Yeah.
better than that. So what the church has through the grace of the Spirit, especially her sacramental life, but then also her particular traditions and various cultural manifestations throughout her history around the
Sure.
world and her different rites, these things have a way of speaking to the human person. They
Hmm.
always will. They're perennial. So we just have to
Hmm.
ask, what are they looking for? What can we provide that is that of the true culture of Christ as an alternative? And then also, how can we get the word out? And so this is where I do
Yeah.
appreciate digital evangelists in some ways, and
Yeah.
how they're able to go into this neo public square,
Yeah.
this sort of new space, if you will.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
not a space, right? It's sort of strange
Yeah.
how digital media works. And there's a whole metaphysical conversation there in that regards. Is it really a
Yeah.
space? Are we actually talking to each other right now? Like these are the kind of
Mm.
questions that come
Yeah.
up in the
Yeah.
metaphysics of technology. But that being said, this is part of the Christian responsibility to bear the world,
Mhm.
to carry the world. And part of carrying the world is saying, yeah, maybe communicating through a podcast is not ideal. I prefer to sit down with someone and preach them heart to
Yeah.
heart. And that will always be superior, actually, sitting down with someone and
Yeah.
speaking heart to heart. But we
Yeah.
live in a culture, we belong to a world, and it has an infrastructure. And there's nothing
Hmm.
Christian about negating that. What's Christian is really entering into a dialogue with it, not to conform ourselves, but in the end to allow and recognize the seeds of Christ in this place and how we can bring them to
Sure.
fruition of the gospel.
That's fantastic. I thought of something as you were talking that ties a lot of the things we've been talking about together, right? This analogical approach, affirming what's good, denying what's bad,
Mhm.
and I thought of C.S. Lewis, who I'm increasingly falling in love with his
Yeah,
writings.
he's great.
And he had something in Mere Christianity where he said, I think it was Mere Christianity. He said the problem isn't that we desire too little, right? Or that
Yeah.
God doesn't want us to desire. So with morality, he kind of taps us on the hand, saying, "Nope, you can't have that." Right? Lewis
Mhm.
is like the problem is that we don't desire enough,
Yeah,
and so all
yeah,
of the bad things in the
exactly right.
culture are that human desire, but they're not desiring enough. It's like it's humanism is great, but without God, you don't have a true humanism.
Mhm.
You need to look higher at a humanism, that is the humanity of God, not just the humanity of man apart from God. And that was
Right.
de Lubac's point.
Yeah.
And same with Lewis. It's really that all these things in nature, all these desires for the supernatural. That's de Lubac, right? Like they need to be directed towards the church again, once again, brought back into the church, and of course through the church towards Christ. And
Mhm.
honestly, to me, that is what the Second Vatican Council is all about, and that is
Yeah.
the vision of reform it has. And I don't think it's been implemented, but I think that I think that now is the time where a lot of the silliness has kind of died down. There's a lot of new interest, right? A lot of people coming in right now. We need to get our act straight, right? And
Yeah.
that's why I love the things you're doing and the approach you have. It very much resonates with the way I think evangelization should be done, really. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
No, thank you so much. And I agree with you how I'm very hopeful. The
Hmm.
Second Vatican Council is young. 60,
Yeah.
70 years is nothing, is
No. Yeah.
nil in the life of the church. The Council of Trent, as we all know historically, those of us who have studied, had a chance to study the Council of Trent, was not hunky dory within a decade after its closing. I mean, it was a
Yeah.
mess, right? And just because human beings are messy sometimes, where sin is real. And
Hmm.
so, what is the responsibility of those of us who are entrusted with the gift of an ecumenical council to persevere and to maintain communion with the church?
Yeah.
To, in a spirit of obedience, seek the good and
Hmm.
try to
Yeah.
act always in cooperation with the magisterium and the movements of the Spirit through the magisterium so as to lead to the salvation of souls. And this is also the real disposition that I've been begging Christ to form in me in his own humility and abandonment as I approach not
Hmm.
just the Second Vatican Council, but my vocation as a priest. What does it mean that I've been ordained, that I
Hmm.
belong to a set of vows, a set of promises that
Yeah.
I've made? What is it also? What are the responsibilities that entails?
Hmm.
And how do I be more and more every day of my life a man of the church? A man
Hmm.
who doesn't seek to make the church what I think she should be, but love her as she is so that she can be
Yeah.
herself.
Yeah.
And that also demands a constant kind of death, too.
Yeah.
In trusting that even beyond my own desires and even the things that I may see that are correct, the Spirit is
Hmm.
the spouse of the church.
Yeah.
And Christ is the spouse of the church, and he will guide her. He will take care of her. So be not
Yeah.
afraid.
Yeah.
What I need to do is sit in stillness. And Vatican II will speak about this in its document on Lumen Gentium in regard to the universal call of holiness. It's very interesting
Hmm.
because it almost lays a piece, or a step by step rather, detail of how we grow in that holiness. And it
Hmm.
begins before all else with the love of the divine will. I find that
Hmm.
very profound, that the
Yeah.
universal call to holiness is rooted in our baptismal identity, which is a confirmation to the obedient Son, the Son who
Yeah.
listens for the will of the Father. And we
Yeah.
can only do that if we're actively seeking to live in this kind of deep communion with the universal church
Yeah. Yeah.
every,
Yeah.
every moment of our lives. But that's difficult to do, brother. But that being said, I have a lot of hope. I agree with you. I think millennials and Gen Z have a different approach and understanding of the council, because also we don't have the same kind of woundedness or baggage that some of the generation before us did. I think in many
Yeah.
ways, rightfully so. It
Yeah.
was a very difficult time, pretty much going from 1940, from the Second World War, up through the
Yeah.
1960s and 70s. Just those decades were brutal in so many
Yeah.
levels.
No.
I don't want to be hypercritical of the greatest generation, the Boomers or the Gen Xers. They had their own sort of situation to approach, and quite
Yeah.
admirable in many ways, I think. But our own generation don't have those same concerns, and so we're able to really look at the council with a fresh set of eyes. And I think that's why you're seeing a renewal, especially among my generation and younger, of clergy, in this deep desire to understand the Second Vatican Council more deeply and to seek a way to properly
I've
implement it.
I've noticed that. I have quite a few seminarian friends, and I am so encouraged. It's just
Mhm.
amazing. By the way, there's a fly flying around. So if you see me doing this, there's a
So,
yeah. Anyway,
according to the
yeah,
Desert Fathers, that's the enemy trying to distract
yeah.
you from the
There you go. There
profundity of
you
this
go.
conversation.
No, but I love what you said about being a man of the church and being humble, in the face of the church, especially because it reminds me so much of de Lubac, right?
Mm,
I mean, he wrote the book, in English, the title is The Splendor of the Church, but
yeah,
in French, it's a meditation on the church.
yeah.
And it's just such a beautiful book. There's parts in it where he's describing the Homo ecclesiasticus, right? The
Mhm.
man of the church, and it's almost like he's writing an autobiography. It's just incredible. Um, but anyway, yeah, that just reminded me of him, and so much
Mhm.
of what you're saying, I mean, it feels very much Lubacian, right? And his approach, his analogical approach, he's deeply rooted in the tradition. He's starting with beauty. I mean, Balthazar called him my master, right? I mean,
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
he's in the process of canonization right now. I'm sure you know that, but sorry,
Yes,
that's
yeah. I
why
mean,
it's affecting me again.
I'm so grateful for that, and really, de Lubac is someone who embodies the patristic ethos.
Oh yeah.
Insofar as, and I'm reminded very specifically of Athanasius and of
Hmm.
Maximus when I recall him, Origen to some degree
Hmm.
as well. In,
Hmm.
insofar as this kind of radical obedience to the church, even in her brokenness, even in the brokenness of
Hmm.
her leadership, de Lubac suffered many years from that.
Yeah. His
He
Jesuit
suffered
superiors, yeah, yeah.
by his Jesuit superiors, and even at the
Hmm.
hand of Pope Pius, who was not well
Yeah.
informed in regards to Lubac because he was sort of
The
trusting with the
Curia,
golden
yeah,
circle and the Curia.
yeah,
So I'm not
yeah,
blaming. I think Pius XII is actually
yeah,
one of my favorite popes of all time. But
yeah, yeah,
that being said, he suffered from the top all the way to the bottom.
yeah.
He was living in the side of a kitchen in Paris at one point, in a little French
That's
town
right.
because he wasn't even
Yeah,
allowed to
yeah,
live in the Jesuit house anymore.
yeah,
Not once did he publish an article condemning the church. Not once
yeah.
did he go on a speaking tour talking about bad bishops. Not once did he
Hmm.
go out saying or accusing or calling names. That is a man
Hmm.
who loves the church. Like you don't
Father,
go out and name names. You don't
yeah,
go out and make, sort of an hour and a half video on somebody if you're a man of the
yeah,
church, right? Like
absolutely,
you bear it with a kind of
yeah,
deep, profound humiliation, which then bears
yeah,
fruit. Delubach dies a cardinal of the Catholic Church,
yes.
but it took his
Oh,
entire life
yeah.
for that to happen.
Father, this reminds me of a story that Father Fessio once told in a video somewhere. It might have been when he talked to Bishop Barron. It might have been somewhere else, but there was a group of some of his confreres, Jesuit priests and theologians that were talking, and he walked into the room and he was listening, and they were complaining about the Pope, and they were saying how the Pope was being unfair and this and that, and he walked out in tears, weeping. And someone came to ask him if he was doing all right, and as he was crying, he said, "I can't be in the room when people are talking about the Pope like that."
Wow.
It was just so moving.
How
Um,
profound.
but
Yeah.
yes, there was something else about the Lubach that has just slipped my mind. It'll come back. It'll come
Don't
back
worry.
any minute. But yeah, no, I mean, he's such a great example. He's such a wonderful theologian. He's really influenced me a lot as well.
Have
Um,
you had a chance to
but
read his journals on the Second Vatican Council? There's a
so
multi-volume work. It's
yeah, I
very
have it right behind me, but I've not
okay.
read it.
Okay.
No, but it
It's
is on my
very
TBR. Yeah, yeah,
so I suggest your audience as well, if you get a chance to pick up those volumes. It's interesting on a
yeah,
couple of levels. It's first of all not theologically deep because it's not a theological work. So if you're not a
yeah,
theologian or you're a little concerned about your reading level,
yeah,
whatever it may be, don't be concerned.
yeah,
It's very readable in that regard. So it's not an academic work, properly speaking. What it's really good
mhm,
about though is giving you sort of a day by day, play by play
mhm,
experience or insight into what's taking place around the Second Vatican
yeah,
Council, and it's
yeah,
absolutely fascinating.
yeah,
He names all the characters that are involved.
yeah,
He sort of gives little bios of them, and the editors have
yeah.
done a superb job putting together his different notes and letters. But it gives you an
Wow.
insight again to his personality too, because he
Yeah.
was already suffering going into the council. He was only
Oh yeah.
there
Yeah.
by sort of almost by default in some ways
Mhm.
because of his
Yeah.
theological standing, but he was definitely not wanted or welcomed by people at the council, especially those who
Yeah.
belonged to the Roman school or some of the other schools
Yeah.
in Rome, the pontifical academies. But his love and his perseverance is so inspirational. It really is just something profound. I think we can learn from because nowadays, especially with social media, talking about the digital continent, we just have
Mhm.
this tendency where we want to
Mhm.
air dirty laundry as soon as we get it, and we
Yeah.
almost feel the compulsion to do so. And there's just
Yeah.
something not Catholic about that. Now, I'm not saying to be secretive. I'm not saying to be deceptive. I'm not saying that truth shouldn't have its say. What I am saying, however, is we have to discern what is my responsibility to the truth and who do I have that responsibility towards? Because the layman has a different sense of responsibility than the bishop.
Yeah. Yeah.
Our responsibility towards the truth is different according to our state of life. So the
Yeah.
married man at home in a town in Newark, New Jersey, has a different role than a bishop working in the dicastery.
Yeah.
And if we're both talking about the same kind of things, it creates this. It can create some unhealthy frictions. if we don't understand where we belong in the life of the church. And so that's something I've also learned as a priest. I learned it the most during COVID. COVID was such an educational time for me in my vocation. I'm very grateful for it in many regards, because I had to learn what it really meant to be obedient, especially when I saw things happening that I necessarily did not agree with. And I'm like, okay, now the rubber hits the road on whether or not I belong to the church, or whether I only belong to the church according to my definitions of what it means to belong.
Right.
So am I really hers, or am I hers on certain conditions?
Yeah.
But if I'm really hers, then that demands me to discern what falls within her prerogative, what falls within my bishop's prerogative, right? What falls within my prerogative as a priest, what falls in the prerogative of Rome. And to really think through those things deeply and intentionally, and then to be obedient to my place and to love that place. Even if I may rightfully be recognizing a wrong happening, my responsibility is to be faithful to my place, right? To love it with my whole mind, heart, body, and soul, and trust the Spirit somehow mysteriously is working towards the truth. But it's by loving where I am with my whole heart, sincerely and genuinely, that sainthood is. Like, sainthood isn't over there, right? Sainthood is always here. It's in front of me. I don't become a saint by thinking over there, right? I become a saint here. And so I can only become a saint where I am, and by loving where I am. And that's just something that's been lost with the digital continent, because we have, again, this artificial sense of being everywhere. But it's sort of having it, I call it a fake omnipotence or omnipresence. It's a false sense of omnipresence that only properly belongs to God. And then so we're sometimes hearing things that, and even on news programs, right? I'm like, why do I need to know about that? Nothing, including Catholic news programs. I'm like, why are you telling me about this? There's nothing that belongs to that diocese. That should be over there. Why are you telling me this? This doesn't belong to me. This is not authentic or adequate to who I am or my position in life. So it's just a little side thought.
No, that's great. And actually what you just said reminded me of the thing I wanted to say about the Lubach, but just to, so I don't forget, I want to ask you about literature and fantasy and things like that.
Sure.
But before I ask you about that, before I ask you about that, it reminded me, after the council, when everything was going haywire, de Lubac could have written a bunch of diatribes against these theologians or seminaries or what have you, kind of like what we do on YouTube nowadays, right? But
exactly.
even like the only time where he does something like that is in his book on Nature and Grace, where he brings up Skilobex. But when I read that, it was like, man, he's being so like courteous and nice and gentle.
He was far kinder than I would have been. I thought about that with Ratzinger as well. He wrote a great article against Casper and Rahner. Both of which I've read. And I thought, my goodness, that was the most Christian, polite smackdown I've ever seen in my entire life. It's theologically brilliant, but he never says an unkind word. It's really just, it's powerful. It's powerful. No, I mean, that takes a saint. That takes a saint to do.
Especially de Lubac, because it's funny because instead of going on a list of diatribes in articles and little books that he might have written, it's funny. He writes this massive 2-tome volume, a 2-volume book, basically. It's called The Spiritual Posterity of Joachim of Fiore, and it hasn't been translated yet in English. I have copies on my back shelf, but it's basically his way of addressing everything that's going wrong at the time, because what he's doing is he's basically making a theological argument through this genealogy of why there's this paracouncil spirit of Vatican II mentality of going beyond the institutional church and merging with the world, as he brings up with Skilobex in his book on Nature and Grace. Anyway, what's fascinating is this guy doesn't get on a mic and start accusing people. He writes a masterpiece of theology, right, and offers it to the church, and then dies of old age. It's like, and Balthasar describes it as the fireworks at the end of his career. So anyway,
and to return to a previous point, that's the sign of a man who trusts in salvation. He believes Christ has saved the world. And because he knows that Christ has saved the world and that he continues to save the world, he actively works in history by divine providence through his bride, the church. There's just a deep peace within his heart. And so he continues to be faithful to what he loves, which is theology in this case. And he just loves that thing and he lives it genuinely and trusts that somehow the Spirit will use it to bless the church. But
Yeah.
notice the faith that constitutes in comparison
Yeah.
to some other spirits that might move us,
Yeah.
as Ignatius of Loyola will warn against in his discernment of spirits, either within us or those demonic spirits outside of us. Some of those other spirits push us in an opposite direction. They create this kind of angst
Yeah.
of concern that I think is rooted in a good place. It's rooted in
Hmm.
in a fear of the loss of the goodness and beauty of the church,
Hmm.
but it forgets the theological foundations of what it means to be the church in the process, and
Hmm.
therefore constitutes a lack of faith and
Yeah.
a loss of a recognition of salvation, that Jesus is still king and he will always be
Yeah.
king, regardless of what I
Yeah.
do in my life. And that's actually what drives evangelical pursuit,
Yeah.
is to
Yeah.
share that news.
That's fantastic. Yeah. No, that's wonderful. I do want, but I know we're an hour in here. If you have
Okay.
to go, please let me know,
No,
Father. But
fantasy. Let's talk about it.
yeah, well,
Yeah,
as an opening, real quick,
sure.
Lord of the Rings is massively influential on my life. I
Oh
wrote
yeah.
an article on it. I'll link the article in the show notes. But my grandmother read to me when I was a kid with my siblings, The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, and it's just shaped my imagination. So to me, Lord of the Rings is the king. Now, I don't want to get you in trouble, but I'm going to bring up another series that I don't know what you think about it, but I am
Uh-huh.
also a fan. The Harry Potter series.
Oh
I'm a
yeah.
huge Harry Potter fan. Um, but of course, then there's also the big three, I call them: Star Wars, right?
Mhm.
And of course, these are filled with archetypes, they tap into mythology, and then Christianity, of course. Why are people so
Yeah.
interested in these things, including myself, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
because they're mythological. So
Yeah.
what we've also lost, and it's so funny we're having this conversation. I was just having it with some people
Mhm.
from the university here recently. How anime has now become
Mhm.
one of the most popular things in the world,
Mhm.
along with video games. Specifically, there's a new Demon Slayer movie, which is an anime. Demon Slayer came out, and it
Mhm.
did the best in the box office out of all the other American films. Over $70 million
Really?
its opening weekend, which is massive for a foreign film.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
it's right now the highest grossing film in the world. And so we have
Wow.
to ask, why is this? Why is it that Gen Z as a whole prefers
Mhm.
anime as opposed to American made media? And
Mhm.
so that led to a conversation about mythology. Now, when I use that
Mhm.
word, I use it in the classical sense of Homer, that a myth is
Mhm.
not something which is untrue. A myth is something that is so true, it must portray itself in a grand way,
Yeah.
in a way that sort of transcends the restricted definitions of the real world, so to speak,
Yeah.
because it
Yeah.
speaks, it almost preaches to that world in this
Mhm.
kind of unique form. And that's what Lord of the Rings does. Lord of the Rings is both immanent to the world and sort of transcends it. That's how you know it's also very Christological. It has that kind of influence
Yeah. Oh
from
my
Tolkien's
goodness.
own
Yeah.
Catholic ethos. But it has
Mhm.
this way of, it's apart from the world, Middle Earth,
Mhm.
but it's so of the world that
Mhm.
everything you read about it speaks directly to your soul and inspires you. So this is what real myth is. And
Yeah.
the series that you named, Harry Potter, is also mythological in that sense. Of course,
Yeah.
Star Wars. I would throw a couple other things in there. Again, I would throw several anime in there now, such as Attack on Titan or Death Note
Mhm.
or Demon Slayer. There's just these kinds of stories. Asia still knows how to tell them. America, we sort of lost, and Europe's lost the
Yeah.
ability to tell these stories in many
Y
ways
Yep.
because we've lost a sense of our culture. See, Asians still have a sense of their culture. It's not a Christian
Mhm.
culture. It's a pagan
Mm.
culture, the Shinto Buddhistic culture, but it's theirs. And they're
Yeah.
speaking from a genuine place, not an abstraction or unorganically. And that's why when you
Yeah.
watch an anime, you get a sense, oh my goodness, there's a deep theme here. There's a kind of humanity here because it's speaking from a
Yeah.
real place. And that's what we used to have with Tolkien. I would say Harry Potter is probably one of the last great works that we had in that regards. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
when you
And,
hear
by the way, Father,
holy,
I'm not saying there aren't
yeah,
problems with Harry Potter, but
yeah,
I
yeah.
do love it. But yeah. Yeah.
I think it's a masterpiece, and we could definitely talk about
Yeah.
it. But that
Yeah.
being said,
Yeah.
there's both those sets of stories. When you
Mhm.
read through them, it caught an entire generation's imagination, right? It
Mhm.
caught an entire generation's, it inspired them to a certain way of living, which prioritized virtue. In the
Yeah.
case of Harry Potter, it would be love, this notion of
Yeah.
sacrificial love, which is of
Yes.
course
Yeah.
epitomized through Harry's mother. in particular, which is interesting to me, like this feminine dynamic which encloaks the son, who then becomes the chosen one. So you're already seeing mythological themes there from Tolkien's own sort of, from not Tolkien, Rowling's own background.
Really? Yeah.
And then Tolkien, of course, we have this great epic of the really a summary of the history of salvation. So I would put that that is, it will always be in its own category. I say Lord of the Rings is the last great epic of literature.
Tolkien's
I would have put Harry Potter in the epic category. Tolkien is a legitimate mythological epic, but I think Harry Potter does a good job striking close to that. So all that to say, the reason why fantasy is so attractive to people is because it has this great gift of being born from real life experience of the good. So the person who's writing it is someone who struggles, who thinks through what it means to be good.
Yeah.
And they've then made a judgment about what it means to be good. And that judgment is true. And because it's true, it speaks to the heart. I would argue J.K. Rowling came to a claim. The claim is the sacrifice of a mother's love conquers evil. Yeah. And she believes, and that is true. And she wrote a story revolving around that fact. And that's why it spoke to millions of people. Tolkien, I believe, he came to a claim that the world is essentially fundamentally good and that evil will never triumph over it. And even the smallest creature can come to triumph over the greatest evil if they live according to the goodness of the world, right? The goodness of creation, so to speak. And that's true. And that's why it speaks to millions of people, right? So we see the same thing in video game culture. The most popular video games are not like these crazy off-the-wall games, right? The most popular video games are the ones that speak deeply to basic human needs. I would not put it in the same category as literature, of course. It's a different kind of entertainment. But they speak very profound, deep truths. And they do it in a unique form. And more video games are starting to become sort of the new avenue of entertainment in culture. Again, I would say anime is as well, where they have sweeping soundtracks, the kind of which you used to hear coming from Hollywood. And now they're coming from Tokyo, or they're coming from, some kind of industry in the Silicon Valley. But they'll hire these full orchestras that will play this beautiful symphonies as background music. And they're going through themes of marriage and of family and of sacrifice. And, it's just a religion, of course, religious exposition, moral theology. A show like Death Note is very interesting in that regard. So there's just so much there that I find fascinating. And I thought about it when I went and saw the new Demon Slayer movie recently. It's just good for me to keep my finger on the pulse of these things, and I like it. But in addition to that, the movie theater was packed. I've not seen that in years. Maybe the last movie was Dune. And number two, it was packed with young people. And it was outstanding. It was a really fascinating film. Beautifully done, great orchestration, outstanding story plot. And I thought, my gosh, I miss watching movies like this. Like the last time I felt excited like that in a movie theater was for The Dark Knight.
Oh yeah, I remember that
movie like 5 times. Because Batman. Favorite character.
Oh, it was so good. I've seen it like 3 times in theaters. Yeah, that was such a good one.
So I'm like, why can't we do that anymore? And it's because we ourselves as the West have forgotten Jesus Christ. So that's why we can't do it anymore.
That's a mic drop right there. That's fantastic. Yeah. And that's the project of the Second Vatican Council, but also, I have so much admiration for Word on Fire. Bishop Barron started doing this by commenting on movies like The Departed for of all movies, and it's a fantastic movie, and that's why I love what you're doing too. And I think that's the way forward. And it's very Balthazarian. It's leading with beauty. It's pointing to the good. It's analogical. It's drawing in, and then it's leading to the true. And at the center of all of that is the person, Jesus Christ, right?
Yeah.
His face. And that's to me is this Christocentric remembering in both senses of the term, like ressourcement, remembering, but also remembering things around Christ, who is, the head of the body.
Yes.
And all these fractures since, the fracturing of Christendom, I just see the church kind of being purified by a lot of this secularism. And so in other words, like I like to say to friends, like things are not without hope. In fact, there's a lot of hope, but things are also very apocalyptic, so it's a lot like the Lord of the Rings right now. Sauron is in charge and he's spreading, and we got Frodo and Sam that are, they're behind enemy lines, but but providence is on our side, and we know the church will prevail.
Yeah.
So
Was Sauron ever really in charge? I mean, that I think
yeah,
that's one of the themes of Lord of the Rings, right? And I would
yeah,
say that about Christianity as well. I mean, just again, Christ is risen. Like that's a historical
yeah,
fact. Satan is done,
yeah,
defeated. From
yeah.
this point forward, I mean, his only job is trying to take as many people with him. But it's game
Hmm.
over for him. He's a weak,
Yeah,
pathetic creature that has no power. It's all been laid at the
yeah,
foot of the cross. So the authority belongs to Jesus Christ. Now, how much of that authority we've been afforded in our baptism, we're going to surrender to the enemy. And that's how demons work. So that whole nother
hmm,
conversation on demonology. But I mean, demons actually have
hmm,
no power, right? Except that which they're able to
hmm.
sap, if you will, like the mentors in many ways, which I think is a great
Yeah, yeah,
illustration
yeah,
of demons. But that which they're
yeah,
able to sap through the surrender of human freedom, which is why they activate fear. So in fear, we
yeah,
surrender freedom. And this is why John will say, true love cast out all fear. Because fear is the
yeah.
only weapon the enemy actually has. It doesn't actually have any power. He's been utterly vanquished by
Hmm.
Christ, by his blood. So all
Yeah,
that to say, though, and going back to your point with hope, yeah, I mean, what are we really worried about? I mean,
yeah. That
what
we're gonna
is,
die? Isn't that part of being
yeah,
Christian?
yeah,
You know?
seriously, I'm like, what is
Yeah.
greater than the passion, death, and resurrection and ascension and ascension of the Spirit? Like,
Hmm.
what can the world do?
Hmm.
Nothing, zero, nil. So
Yeah.
now what does that mean? That means we need to approach the throne of God confidently, as it says in the letter to Hebrews.
Mm.
We approach the throne confidently and full of hope. And he who has established a tabernacle not built by human hands, but built by the Father, that tabernacle
Mhm.
being those who are baptized in the mystical body of the church. So to approach the
Yeah.
throne, the sacred altar, the sacramental life with a sense of confidence and to be nourished at that fount, so then we can go and to preach this good news to the world, to a world that's been saved, to point it towards its true sense of what it's longing for. And every single one of these cultural trends and every single one of these popular
Yeah.
phases, it's looking for Jesus. So I would say, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely have hope. If there's any kind of anxiety, take that to spiritual direction or confession. That's
Yeah.
satanic.
Yeah.
That's not from Jesus. And
Yeah.
really just be filled with this joy, like rejoice in the Lord. It's going to be great,
Yeah.
man. I'm very excited. I'm very excited.
Yeah.
And I'm the son of a Marine Corps veteran as well, so maybe I just like a little bit
Yeah.
of a fight along the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I just have this kind of confidence and peace that's really come to reign in my soul.
That's amazing, Father. Father, we're gonna have to have one of these days, a conversation on Harry Potter. I mean, I've thought about it for a long
Sure,
time. There's
sure.
so much stuff in Harry Potter. I mean, like,
Brandon
I
Vaught
mean,
just made a great video on that
yeah.
from Word on Fire. It's worth watching. I think he did a sit down with somebody,
Okay.
but he did a
I'll have
great
to
because
watch it.
he's really,
Yeah.
really into that. Like I'm more into the
Yeah.
anime video game conversation, but
Gotcha.
Brandon Vaught
Gotcha.
is
Yeah.
superb in regards to like going through Harry Potter and some of the theological themes.
Yeah, I'll have to reach out to him because I there's so much stuff in that series. It's almost
Oh
like I think it's like more overtly Christian than Narnia, but because
yeah.
of the setting, no one notices.
Right, right.
But anyway, yeah, there's just so much stuff going on in that, and she's been very influenced by C.S. Lewis as well. She said so several times.
Mhm.
Of course, she's her own person, and anyway, but God bless
Right. I
her.
mean,
But
she's not St.
yeah,
Catherine of Siena. Yeah,
no, there
but
you
yeah,
go.
I mean, but she
Yeah,
wrote a great story. I mean, neither was
yeah,
Michelangelo, but
right,
like,
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
so,
Good
so I mean,
point.
yeah, don't
Good point.
expect that. I hope she does. I hope
Yeah,
one day she becomes a saint and converts entirely to Christ and the church. But
there you go. Yeah,
you can't take that apart from something she produced, which is really profound. I mean,
that's right.
it really
Yeah, that would
is.
be the genetic fallacy. Yeah. No, very
Yeah.
good. Yeah. Father, this has been a blast. We've
Thank
gone
you.
over the 1 hour limit. Yeah. So it was
Yeah,
just great talking to you. And I'm going to put links to Word on Fire underneath. But is there any
great.
place you want to send the audience? Anything you want them to watch where you are talking about video games or anything like that?
Yeah, so they could look up if they want the God in Gaming series with Word on Fire. So I believe it's 6 episodes that we did on just video game culture. And we also interview a series of influential people in the gaming industry. So it's very insightful, especially for
Mhm.
parents, but also for
Yeah.
people who are gamers themselves. So it's the first of its kind in regards to dialogue
Yeah.
between the church and the gaming sort of
Mhm.
industry. And then there's also something called the Burrowshire podcast that I've done
Mm.
before with Brandon Vaught. That's worth a watch. There's a series of episodes on there. They're all pre-recorded. They were done a couple years ago, but
Okay.
there's a series of topics there. If people want to continue listening, they can go through.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, audience, thank you for tuning in. If you enjoy videos like these, make sure you like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. And if you enjoy the channel, you can go ahead and support at patreon.com/the Logos Project. And Father, thanks again for coming on. It was a blast talking to you.
An absolute blessing, brother. Praying for your ministry. Thanks for all that you do. And thank you to your audience as well. God bless you guys.
Thank you. God bless everybody.